Today we got a 2004 Buick LeSabre with an oil leak coming from under the intake. It's probably pretty common on these. Pull that off, lift this up and out of here. Ta-da! Continues to pool oil on top of the lower intake fairly quickly, actually. I think this is often diagnosed as bad valve cover gaskets, but what I actually think happens is I think there's oil leaking up through the lower intake bolts and puddling in the intake there. We'll see if I'm right with that. I'm gonna go ahead, pull this whole top end off this motor and reseal it. If you're ever working on these and you're doing this job, take a look down here. Make sure it's already got the aluminum cooling elbows on it. This part right here. These are plastic from the factory. They're absolute garbage. They fail, every 50,000 miles if you're lucky. So make sure those are the aluminum ones. We got to drain the coolant because that runs through the lower intake. At least need to drop the level down pretty good. You got to take off about 1 million push pin clips. So if you have one of these, it really helps, but you can do it with side cutters or whatever. Wasn't enough for Buick, I guess. All right. The deck's cool and this doesn't look very good anyway. It almost looks like someone's got some leak stop in here. But I've always worked on this car since new and I sure didn't put that in there. But it's got about 75, 80,000 miles. It's probably time to flush the coolant anyway, so no harm, no foul. Upper intake is off. This just further proves my point. There's puddles of oil underneath the upper intake, okay? The upper intake does not have any oil passages in it. It's a plastic intake, strictly air. So it cannot be the valve covers because we have oil back here and oil up here. So anyway, I'm glad the diagnosis was accurate because this isn't as fun as it looks, I promise you, but anywho, let's carry on. I got to get the alternator off, the alternator bracket off, start working on this lower intake. What the heck? Okay. Everything's metric on this motor except for the lower intake bolts are 3/8. I've got it glued in the valleys, so a little bit of breaking loose got to happen. All right, so here's what we're left with, and the lower intake's off. Open valley motor. It's got some crazy balance shaft in here. I've never actually worked on one of these before. I've always done the 3100s, 3400s and stuff, where you have to pull push rods out to get the gaskets off the heads. Not the case here. Yummy. Man, For the mileage, this thing sure has some crappy looking stuff going on. You know what? I don't know if that's oil or coolant jacket. Looks like coolant, but it must have got oil in the coolant, and that's why the coolant's so disgusting. Look at that, there's oil back there too. Yep, got cross-contamination going on. Especially, okay, it's deadheaded there, that's why all the crap builds up. But yeah, these are plastic frame gaskets. Similar issues to what used to happen with the 3100s and 3400s, I guess. Okay, time to clean up and start putting it back together. Here, and they are seeping, but they're not the root cause of the oil leak. Plastic, fancy. Not too bad under there, eh? Hit these with some purple power, make it a little more presentable. Anyway, that's good enough. We're not going for show car quality here. We're just making it known that somebody was here and made a repair. And these are the new grommets. Like I said, they're only a couple bucks. Not worth not replacing them. And they're real easy. They just literally snap in. So I'm actually gonna take a smidge of RTV and just put a couple dabs around here just to hold it in place while I'm dropping it on. WD-40, 400 grit wet on a sanding block. Here's the old rundown. I do this on all kinds of mating surfaces, cylinder heads, blocks, intake manifolds. Whatever needs to be flat and needs the high spots knocked down and get a nice finish. This has never done me wrong. If you don't like it, don't do it on your car, but this has never caused me a problem. I know people get weird about sandpaper. You can see the factory machining marks are still in this. I mean, I'm hardly taking off any material, but I am knocking down any high spots and doing some light flattening. Do this a couple times, keep it well lubed. She's gonna seal up great. These are the new gaskets for the lower intake, made by Felpro in the United States, great country. But anyway, these are metal framed gaskets versus that, whatever that crap's called that GM put in there from the factory. It's like some type of plastic something. Anyway, we'll go with these, and then they gave me a variety of Valley gaskets. We'll see what fits this motor. It's probably some fit different motors, whatever, but all right, let's throw it together. Here first, seal the head to the block interface there. Then set my Valley gasket in. Good. Then put a little more for the interface between the gasket and the Valley gasket. All right, I'm not gonna bore you putting this thing back together. I'll time lapse it, we'll get through it real quick. I'm gonna throw the whole lower back together, put the upper back on, button up this motor, and then I got a bunch more things to do to this car. Okay, so you saw me put it all back together. No spare parts, everything looks good. Fire it up, see if she runs, and then we're gonna go ahead and change the oil and put coolant in it. But I wanna give it a good leak check before I do anything like that. Cycle the key a couple times because the fuel rail's empty. All right, she sounds all right. Oh, come on, who the? Jesus Christ. Okay. So, this car needs an oil change anyway, but I would do it no matter what after you do lower intake manifold gaskets, because when you lift that lower intake, coolant is gonna drain into the crankcase. There's really no way around it. So it'd probably burn off, but it's just worth doing an oil change. Letting this thing idle for 30 minutes or so. Want it to get super hot. Want to make sure the fans come on, and then I'm checking the whole thing for leaks, especially the radiator drain plug, right? A lot of times these haven't been cracked for 15 years and that O-ring's not going to hold again. So I need this car to be perfect the first time. I'm going to do the extra time to test it, make sure everything's okay. All right, everything looks great, nice and dry on the plug there. Well, that's just residual, but no leaks on the plug. Everything looks solid. Very happy with how this job turned out. Going to button up this bottom panel again with all 300 of this stupid clips that I hate. And then I'm gonna take it outside and wash it because there's coolant on the block and I don't want it smelling. Then I'll throw this thing back on and we're done here. All right, so I hope you guys found something useful out of this video. If you have a Series 2 3800 and you have oil collecting behind the valve covers on the lower intake, it is probably not the valve covers. Don't waste your time. It's probably the intake gaskets. Usually this isn't a big issue, but sometimes like mice and other things get under that cover. They put a bunch of crap in there. You could have a potential fire hazard. But really the reason I wanted to do this is because of how close we were to mixing the oil and coolant, and that's never a good time for bearings and everything else. So hope you learned something. You got any questions, post them in the comments, and I'll see you next time on Spank Ranch Garage.